He thought the worst was behind him, but then the very legal system that had once stopped short of calling him a murderer came roaring back, determined to prove intent beyond mere negligence, and therefore, the already shocking saga of Oscar Pistorius would spiral into a courtroom encore, one that would ultimately redefine his guilt, his punishment, and his lasting legacy in South Africa. This is part 2 of the gripping real-life drama that began on a tragic Valentine's Day morning.
Prosecutors in South Africa have confirmed they will appeal the sentence handed down to Oscar Pistorius for the killing of his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp.
In late 2014, the South African prosecution, disappointed by the 5-year prison sentence for culpable homicide, took the rare step of appealing Judge Thokozile Masipa's verdict.
Not guilty and is discharged. Instead, he is found guilty of culpable homicide. On count 2,
they argued that the trial court had failed to apply the principle of dolus eventualis correctly, meaning Pistorius should be found guilty of murder for firing lethal shots, regardless of who was behind the door. And therefore, in December 2014, Judge Masipa allowed the state to challenge her ruling before the Supreme Court of Appeal, SCA. On November 3, 2015, a panel of 5 judges reviewed the trial transcripts, but then no fresh evidence was introduced. They focused squarely on whether Pistorius intended to kill, even if he did not know it was Reeva in the bathroom. And therefore, on December 3, 2015, the SCA unanimously overturned Pistorius's culpable homicide conviction, replacing it with murder.
The accused's conviction and sentence on count 1 are set aside and replaced with the following: guilty of murder, with the accused having had criminal intent in the form of dolus eventualis.
Although the facts of the shooting remained the same, Pistorius had to return to the High Court for a new sentencing hearing. But then, the prosecution and defense once again clashed over how severe his punishment should be under the revised conviction. Led by Gary Nel, the prosecution demanded the prescribed 15-year minimum for murder in South Africa. They highlighted the tragic death of Reeva Steenkamp and the broader crisis of violence against women.
We argue that the minimum sentence of 15 years ought to be imposed. We argue for long-term imprisonment.
Nell insisted Pistorius still showed limited remorse, and therefore, a lenient sentence would undermine justice and disrespect the victim's family's pain. Advocate Barry Rue pleaded that Pistorius's life was already in ruins, his fame gone, his finances depleted, his physical disability making prison especially hard.
He fired a shot and will pay for this for the rest of his life. It's not going away. He lost his future with his chosen loved one. He has paid physically, losing his health. He has paid emotionally. He has paid financially. He's left being dependent on others. He's paid socially. He's judged and vilified by many and verbally attacked. He has paid by the loss of his identity.
The defense urged Judge Masipa to consider his unique vulnerabilities and therefore not impose the full 15-year term. In a controversial move, Pistorius removed his prosthetics and walked on his stumps before the court to illustrate his vulnerability and heighten sympathy. But then, public opinion remained divided. Some viewed it as a genuine plea, others saw it as a theatrical tactic. On July 6, 2016, Judge Masipa announced a 6-year prison sentence for the murder conviction.
for the murder dolus eventualis of the deceased, that is Reeva Steenkamp, is 6 years imprisonment.
South African prosecutors, dissatisfied yet again, appealed the sentence. The Supreme Court of Appeal intervened once more, deeming 6 years shockingly lenient. But then, on November 24, 2017, they imposed a final sentence of 15 years, minus time already served.
The sentence imposed by the Court of Call in respect of murder is set aside and substituted with the following: the respondent sentenced to imprisonment for a period of 13 years and 5 months. I hereby hand down the judgment.
The long-running battle ended with Pistorius classified as a murderer, serving a substantially longer term. Back in custody in July 2016, Pistorius spent time in Kosi Mampurutu's hospital wing before being transferred to the more disability-friendly Atteridgeville Correctional Center. He maintained a low profile, participated in Bible study, and worked in administrative roles to pass the time. He underwent an official victim-offender dialogue in June 2022, meeting face-to-face with Reeva's father, Barry Steenkamp. But then, the encounter did not yield the full confession or closure the Steenkamp family sought. By mid-2023, Pistorius approached the halfway mark of his sentence, and therefore, he became eligible for parole under South African law. After some delays and a denied request in March 2023, the parole board finally granted him conditional release.
Former athlete Oscar Pistorius has been released from prison on parole more than 10 years after killing his girlfriend and is now at home.
He quietly left prison on January 5th, 2024, to serve the remainder of his term under strict supervision at his uncle's Pretoria home. Now on parole until December 2029, Pistorius lives under community corrections with restricted travel, random check-ins, and mandatory participation in rehabilitation programs.
He will not be able to consume alcohol. He will not be allowed to give media interviews. He will need to take part in a further part of rehabilitation sessions on things like anger management therapy and also gender violence issues as well. There will be discussions with a parole officer should Oscar Pistorius ever want to take up any employment opportunities, that kind of thing. Travel will also be restricted internationally, and we expect that these pretty strict conditions for Oscar Pistorius will be in place for the remainder of his sentence, which would take him through until December of 2029.
He is barred from giving media interviews, and therefore, the once famed Blade Runner now exists largely out of the public eye, jogging on private grounds and focusing on compliance to avoid further legal trouble.
Do you think justice has been served?
Yes.
Reeva's parents, Barry and June Steenkamp, withstood years of appeals and sentencing debates. They welcomed the final 15-year term.
But now we have justice for her.
I just feel that now we can get on with our lives.
Barry Steenkamp passed away in September 2023, still convinced that anger, not fear, drove the gunshots that killed his daughter. Hoping to ensure Reeva's memory would save others, the Steenkamps established the Reeva Steenkamp Foundation in 2015, spotlighting the epidemic of violence against women in South Africa.
How are you going to use this foundation to keep her memory and, of course, her hopes and dreams of helping South Africa alive?
Ministers and people involved in social development are joining hands with us to a way forward. We don't know if we're going in the right way, but I think we're starting with the youth and going to schools.
Powerful.
They organized awareness events and lobbied for stricter gun control, and therefore, Reeva's story became a catalyst for addressing intimate partner violence. Pistorius's fall from grace served as a cautionary tale about idolizing sports icons. Sponsors like Nike quickly ended partnerships, but then the global fascination only grew, fueled by televised court proceedings and documentary films dissecting every aspect of the tragedy. Once venerated for transcending physical limits, Pistorius will likely forever be associated with Reeva's death. In the end, the Pistorius case remains an enduring chapter in South Africa's legal annals, a story that forces the world to confront fame, tragedy, and accountability in stark, unforgettable terms.